At the very center of Stonehenge, beneath the great fallen stones, half buried in the earth where almost no one notices it, lies a single slab of greenish sandstone. For centuries, people walked past it without a second thought. It is not the tallest stone, not the most dramatic. It is just there, lying flat at the heart of the most famous monument on Earth. And in 2024, scientists discovered that this stone does not belong to England at all. It does not even belong to the same half of the island. Its chemistry matched with eerie precision a stretch of rock at the far northern tip of Scotland, more than 750 kilometers away, which means that almost 5,000 years ago, someone moved a 6-ton stone the entire length of Britain, with no wheel, no roads, no metal tools, no maps. We can now fingerprint that stone to the exact region it was born in. What we cannot explain is how it made the journey, or why anyone wanted it to. This is the Long Archives, where we follow the questions that new discoveries crack open rather than close. If you like the facts kept clean from the fantasy, subscribe and stay to the end. There is a new entry every Sunday. To understand why one stone changed everything, you have to understand how Stonehenge is built. The monument on Salisbury Plain went up in stages, with its great stones raised around 2,500 years before Christ, a time before written language in Britain, before the wheel was in common use there, before bronze. The people who built it left no documents at all. Everything we know about them, we have had to read from the stones themselves. It was raised in stages over many centuries. First, a great circular ditch and bank around 3,000 years before Christ. Then, around 2500 BC, the giant stones we picture today. The people who did this were farmers and herders. Their toolkit was stone, antler picks, timber, rope, and muscle. No writing, no metal, no wheeled transport in regular use. Every feat that follows has to be imagined strictly within those limits, and the stones come in 3 very different kinds. The largest, the towering uprights and lintels that give Stonehenge its iconic shape, are sarsens, a hard local sandstone, and they were dragged from the Marlborough Downs, around 25 kilometers to the north. Hard work, but local. Then there are the smaller bluestones, and those were already a shock to scholars. They were traced to the Preseli Hills in Wales, roughly 250 kilometers away. The idea that Stone Age people had hauled tons of rock all the way from Wales was, for a long time, the most astonishing fact about the place. It had taken decades of patient geology to pin those bluestones to specific outcrops in the Preseli Hills. In some cases to the exact quarries where archaeologists later found the very recesses the stones had been levered out of. So the Welsh connection was hard-won and solid, and it made Wales the assumed home of anything unusual at Stonehenge, including the flat green slab at its center. And then there is the altar stone, the flat greenish slab at the center. For years, it was simply assumed to be Welsh too, lumped in with the bluestones, another stone from Preseli or somewhere near it. No one looked too hard because everyone thought they already knew the answer. That assumption was about to be overturned completely. And here is the quiet irony. Today, you can stand at Stonehenge and never even notice it.
Steady.
The altar stone lies flat at the center, pinned beneath 2 collapsed giants. Green, recumbent, unremarkable. The one stone that most visitors step straight past. The most traveled object in the whole monument is also the easiest to miss. What changed was not a new excavation, but a new way of reading a rock. Every stone carries a kind of birth certificate locked inside it, in the form of microscopic mineral grains. Tiny crystals of minerals like zircon, apatite, and rutile form when the rock first comes together, and they trap within them the chemistry and the age of that exact moment and place. 2 slabs of sandstone might look identical to the eye, but their mineral grains can carry completely different signatures. different ages, different chemical fingerprints, depending on where on Earth they formed. Read those grains carefully enough, and a stone will tell you, in effect, where it was born. The most powerful of these clocks is the zircon. Zircon crystals are nearly indestructible, and each one locks in the age of its formation through the steady decay of uranium into lead. A clock you can still read hundreds of millions of years later. A handful of zircon ages, combined with the chemistry of apatite and rutile, gives a rock a signature so specific it can be traced not just to a country but to a single geological basin. It is the same kind of forensic fingerprinting that, in other cases, has exposed forgeries and tied artifacts to their exact source. This is part of a quiet revolution in archaeology. The same provenance science, reading the isotopes and mineral grains locked inside materials, has begun to retrace the hidden movements of the ancient world, where metals were mined, where pottery clay was dug, even where people themselves were born and raised. Again and again it has revealed that the ancient world moved far more and far farther than anyone assumed. The altar stone is the most dramatic case yet, but it is not alone. In 2024, a team led by a geoscientist named Anthony Clarke, working out of Curtin University in Australia with colleagues in Britain, did exactly that with two small fragments of the altar stone. They measured the ages of its zircon grains, its apatite, its rutile, building a precise chemical portrait of the slab. And then they went looking for a match. It was not in Wales. It was not anywhere in southern Britain. The closest match, and it was a strikingly good one, lay at the opposite end of the island, the Orcadian Basin, a body of ancient sandstone in the far northeast of Scotland around Orkney and the northern tip of the mainland. The altar stone, sitting at the dead center of an English monument, had come from at least 750 kilometers away. It was, and remains, the longest journey known for any stone in any Neolithic monument on Earth. The result was so unexpected that the team tested it against the other candidate regions, and against the Welsh sources everyone had assumed for a century. And the Scottish match held while Wales fell away. The stone that had been quietly filed under Welsh probably turned out to be the single most well-traveled object in the entire monument. Sit with how strange that is. The people who built Stonehenge reached past the nearer hills, past Wales, past everything close at hand, and brought their central stone from a place so far north it is nearly off the map of Britain. They did it deliberately, and they did it with the technology of the late Stone Age. So how do you move 6 tons of rock 750 kilometers without a wheel, without a road, without an iron tool? This is where the proven fact ends and the real mystery begins, and where the experts genuinely disagree. There are, broadly, 2 camps. The first says, ice did it. For decades, some geologists have argued that the stranger stones at Stonehenge were not carried by people at all, but by glaciers. That during the last ice age, sheets of ice plucked rocks from distant places and dumped them by chance within reach of Salisbury Plain, where Stone Age builders simply found them lying around. If that were true, the 750-kilometer journey would be the work of nature, not humans, and the mystery would partly dissolve. But the team behind the 2024 discovery argues hard against the ice. The pattern of glacial movement, they say, does not run the right way to carry a stone from northeast Scotland down to southern England. The geology does not support it. In their reading, the evidence points to a deliberate, carefully planned human journey, a stone chosen, quarried, and carried south on purpose. And that is the interpretation that has captured the world's imagination, because if it is right, it is staggering. Because then the question becomes, which way did it travel? Overland, the route is brutal almost beyond imagining. Hundreds of kilometers across mountains, bogs, forests, and rivers, dragging a 6-ton block with ropes, timber, and muscle through territory held by who knows how many different communities. Many researchers think the land route is simply too hard to be likely. The alternative is the sea, floating the stone on some kind of raft or boat down the long, storm-battered coastline of Britain, around headlands and through open water, in vessels we can barely reconstruct. That, too, is a feat at the absolute edge of what we believe Neolithic people could do. Neither answer is comfortable. Both describe something close to a miracle of organization and skill. It is worth being honest about the boats. We have no Neolithic vessel from Britain known to carry anything like 6 tons. The celebrated prehistoric craft we have recovered are later and smaller. So the sea theory asks us to imagine boats or great lashed rafts that have left no trace, built by people we keep underestimating. And as for the ice, the geologists who argue for human transport point to a stubborn problem. The glaciers that once covered Britain flowed in directions that simply would not carry a stone from northeast Scotland down to Salisbury Plain, and no trail of similar Scottish rubble litters the route, as it should if ice had done the carrying. The stone, they argue, did not drift south. It was sent. And note what we do not have. Not a single piece of the boat, not a length of the rope, not a record of the route. We have the starting point in the rocks of Scotland and the ending point in the soil of Salisbury Plain. Everything in between, the years of labor, the people who pulled and paddled and died along the way, has vanished. The journey is certain. The journey is also completely invisible. However it was done, the human cost is hard to overstate. Moving a 6-ton stone is not a job for a handful of strong people. Experiments with smaller megaliths suggest dozens, even hundreds, working in shifts, with sledges, rollers, and greased timber tracks, advancing perhaps a few kilometers on a good day. Stretch that across 750 kilometers of hostile country, or weeks on the open sea, and you are looking at an effort measured in seasons, perhaps years, and in the labor of whole communities, many of whom would never lay eyes on Stonehenge themselves. Someone decided that price was worth paying for a single stone. Step back and you realize this discovery is not really about a rock. It is about the people, and it quietly rewrites who we thought they were. For a long time, it was easy to imagine the builders of Stonehenge as scattered local tribes, raising a monument for their own small corner of the world. But a stone carried the length of Britain cannot be the work of one isolated village. To move 6 tons across or around an entire island, you need an extraordinary amount of coordination. Many communities agreeing to a shared effort, knowledge of distant lands and waters, the ability to organize labor and supplies over months or years, and a reason powerful enough to make all of that worth doing. The altar stone implies a Neolithic Britain that was connected, cooperative, and ambitious on a scale we had badly underestimated. It also reframes Stonehenge itself. If the great sarsens are local, the bluestones are Welsh, and the central stone is Scottish, then the monument begins to look less like a regional temple and more like a gathering of an entire island into a single place. Pieces of the north, the west, and the south brought together and raised as one. Some researchers have begun to wonder whether Stonehenge was, in a sense, a monument of unification, a stone embodiment of the idea that the far-flung peoples of Britain were, somehow, one, and there is independent evidence pointing the same way. Right beside Stonehenge stood Durrington Walls, the settlement where the builders appear to have lived and feasted. Archaeologists there have recovered tens of thousands of animal bones, the leftovers of enormous feasts. And when they tested the teeth of the pigs and cattle, the chemistry told a remarkable story. The animals had been raised all over the island, in West Wales, in the uplands of northern England, and strikingly, as far away as northeast Scotland, the very region the altar stone came from. People were already traveling and driving their herds across the whole of Britain to gather at this one place. Researchers have called it the first real phase of pan-British connectivity, the earliest moment we can see the whole island moving as one. Against that backdrop, a stone from Scotland at the center of the monument is no longer a freak. It fits a world that was, astonishingly, already linked coast to coast. More than anything, the discovery is a rebuke to a habit we cannot seem to break: underestimating the people of the deep past. We call them primitive. Picture them barely scraping a living from the land. And then they reach across an entire island, by means we still cannot reconstruct, to set one particular stone at the heart of their greatest work. They were not simple. We were simply not looking closely enough. And that is where the deepest question lives, the one the science opened and cannot answer. We now know with hard chemistry where the stone came from. We will probably never know why it had to come from there. Why was a slab from the very edge of the world worth a journey that may have cost lives? What did that distant place mean to them? The fact is precise. The meaning is gone, buried with the people who carried it. Some have wondered whether the far north held a special power in their world, a sacred place, an ancestral homeland, the gift of a distant ally whose stone sealed a bond. Orkney, after all, was itself a Neolithic heartland, with monuments and ideas that rippled south across Britain. Perhaps the altar stone was a piece of that prestige, carried down to borrow its strength. But these are stories we tell to fill the silence. The people who knew the true reason left it out of the only record they kept.
Understood.
The stones. If that gap fascinates you as much as it does me, the space between what we can measure and what we can never recover. Subscribe and you will get a new entry from the archive every Sunday. So let us be exact about what is known. At the heart of Stonehenge lies a 6-ton sandstone slab, the Altar Stone. In 2024, the chemistry of its mineral grains was matched to the Orcadian Basin of northeast Scotland, proving that it traveled at least 750 kilometers, the longest journey of any stone in any Stone Age monument. The researchers argue it was carried by people, not ice, most likely by sea, and its presence suggests a Neolithic Britain far more connected and organized than we ever imagined. Everything else, exactly how they moved it, the route they took, and above all why they wanted it, remains unknown and may always be. A flat green stone lying quietly in the grass where millions of visitors step around it. Born at the top of the world, carried to the bottom and set down at the center of everything, by hands that left us the stone and took the reason with them.